Wildcard weekend. Then we're going to get into some of these head coach openings around the league. And we're going to get into some of the candidates, some of the hotter ones, in my opinion, that they should get the first crack at a lot of these open jobs. Then we're going to get into the gambling preview and predictions for the divisional round of the playoffs. So we have a lot to cover here. Let's get right into this thing. We're going to start with the Browns versus the Texans, a game that went a completely opposite direction of what I was anticipating. I definitely bet the Browns -2.5 and thought that was going to be one of the easier bets of the weekend. That's like the first one I saw whenever the lines opened up, and I was like, that one seems like a lock to me. And it went completely haywire right off the bat for the most part. I mean, the Texans and the Browns were pretty competitive in the first quarter. And then, the Texans just kept scoring, man. Bobby Slowick, offensive coordinator for the Houston Texans, who is now getting some looks, getting some interviews for some of these openings around the league. We'll get to that in a little bit. But he was putting his players in position to make plays. And C.J. Stroud was hitting on all cylinders. He was making throws and just reading the defense, I guess, perfectly as you can really ask a rookie quarterback to ever do, really. I mean, the Cleveland Browns defense was one of the best we've seen in a long time, especially at least in the last few years when it comes to dominant on defense and just like the physicality, the speed, pass rush ability. The Browns pretty much had it all, but what the Texans were able to do was just kind of take advantage of some of their over-aggressiveness. They knew that they could get away with certain things on defense because of how talented they were, and Jim Schwartz is already an aggressive play caller on the defensive side of the ball there. So the Texans just kind of used that against them and just did a whole lot of hard play action and was getting people wide open in situations where you just would have never expected them to against a good defense like that. So C.J. Stroud was making plays all over the field, throwing the ball to Nico Collins, who that duo for the long haul is going to be very, very formidable. Like I said last week, for fantasy purposes, for the factors of them going deep in the playoffs and potentially trying to win a Super Bowl together, that wide receiver duo and quarterback combination is going to be really scary moving forward for people in the AFC, especially with a quarterback that is obviously a rookie going straight into the playoffs and beating a team right off the rip. Just impressive stuff from a rookie head coach in D'Amico Ryans himself, who has had an incredible first year as a head coach as well. And then you have C.J. Stroud having an incredible year as a rookie quarterback. You just don't see those two things winning a playoff game in year one. So very impressive stuff from them too. They get a huge win there. Obviously, they're going to have to go now to Baltimore and play a game against the number 1 seed in the AFC playoff picture, which is not going to be fun for them. But we'll get to the gambling preview and prediction and all that stuff later. But yeah, very impressive stuff from C.J. Stroud. Just one of the young guys, young cats in the league that is just, just setting up the stage for the future of the NFL. And you got to love when a young guy like that is already showing so much potential. It just makes you confident for the next few generations of these, quarterbacks and teams and young players in general, just contributing right off the rip. And there's a lot of players in the playoffs and even in the season in general, that even if they were on a team that didn't make the playoffs, that made huge contributions in year one. And you just love to see that no matter what. It's just good for the product. It's good for the brand. It's good for the NFL. It's good for everybody. It's good for the viewing purposes of fans of all the teams in general. So awesome start to the NFL playoffs there. The Texans just blow the doors off the Browns. Joe Flacco throws 2 interceptions, back-to-back 2 pick sixes. I felt like a genius because right before he threw that first pick six, I did tweet out, this is a situation you do not want Joe Flacco in. You do not want him to have to shoulder the responsibility of having to make a big comeback in a game like this. And at that point, they were only down by 10. And I thought that was a margin that was a little bit too much for Joe Flacco to essentially, the team start abandoning the run game and just put all the responsibilities on his shoulders to make a comeback. And I essentially tweeted that and said, this is too much pressure for Joe Flacco at this point, and if he's got to make a big comeback, that's when the turnovers can begin. You can go look at my Twitter and see when exactly I tweeted. It was right before the first pick six, and then he throws a pick six, and then the next exact possession, he throws another one, and that's pretty much all she wrote. C.J. Stroud was chilling in the second half of this game. He didn't have to do a whole lot, so just a crazy game that nobody really expected. I mean, for the Houston Texans to drop 45 in their first playoff game with a rookie head coach and rookie QB is just crazy stuff that nobody could have really predicted. Let's move on to the night game, the game that everybody was pissed off about because it was strictly on a streaming service in Peacock. Luckily, I already had Peacock as a streaming service, so I wasn't one of those people that had to, start a free trial, 30-day trial, or whatever you had to do to get the game for the time being, and then just cancel the subscription. And then literally the next day, when NBC had I think it was the Lions and Rams game, they shoved it all in our face by saying that that game on Peacock was the most streamed sporting event in the history of the U.S. and blah, 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 blah. And it was like, congratulations to the people that put that on. And it was like, come on now, bro. That was literally NBC and like, whatever. It was crazy. They just kind of threw it in your face that like people signed up to watch a football game. Like we know that was going to be the case, but whatever. Let's get on to the game. Chiefs versus Dolphins. Obviously, everybody heard the stories about the weather and what the temperature was. It was like -7 at points, and then obviously the wind chill made it like in the -30s when it came to what it actually felt like on the field. It was a crazy game. It looked ridiculous. The ground looked like it was as hard as concrete out there. It looked so painful when people got hit. It was crazy to watch. Obviously, everybody probably by now has seen the clip of Patrick Mahomes dipping his head trying to get to the goal line, and the defender also hits his helmet, and then a piece of his helmet flies off. Like literally, Patrick Mahomes' helmet cracked and it essentially fell apart on the field after a hard collision there when he was trying to score a touchdown rushing the ball. But man, just crazy how cold it was out there. Obviously, that was the helmet was so frozen that just that impact just blew his helmet up essentially, and then he had trouble getting another one. But that's all side stuff there. Let's just get to what happened in the game here. Essentially, the Miami Dolphins, the South Florida boys, and Tua could not handle the weather. They couldn't handle the Kansas City Chiefs' physicality and defense. They couldn't handle Isaiah Pacheco running the football, and they couldn't handle Patrick Mahomes' playmaking. So all of that was a recipe for disaster for the Dolphins. I will say there's a little bit of an asterisk on this when it comes to the Dolphins' defense, who has gotten just extremely and ridiculously banged up the last few weeks of the season. They were just throwing random vets in at the very end there. They signed like a Melvin Ingram and a Justin Houston to try to supplement the losses of Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb, and it was just very unfortunate. I mean, Xavier Howard wasn't playing in this game. Javon Holland wasn't playing in this game. They had so many of their playmakers out in this game that it was going to be hard to overcome that in general. Vic Fangio did as good of a job as you could really ask with all of these just ragtag group of guys that he had to grab off the street to just even field a team, field a defense. So he was behind the 8 ball from the jump, and that was very unfortunate. But it really didn't matter because it just felt like, and I bet on the Chiefs and to cover and whatnot, it just felt like the Chiefs were going to win in this matchup no matter what. You just felt like they were more prepared. They were going to be ready for the weather. They live in that weather all year round. The guys from South Florida and Miami, man, their blood has gotten thin over the years living there, and they just probably gotten a little bit soft in that area. But it just felt like the Chiefs were probably going to be more prepared. You have Andy Reid. Obviously, they have Mike McDaniel on the other side, which I think he's a great head coach. I don't think that's necessarily all on him. The players on the Dolphins, like a guy that I've caught a lot of flack for kind of coming after Tua in the past, but like these are the type of games where I feel vindicated and justified to be not super just a big Tua fan in general because of the fact of his limitations as a thrower of the football. Like, he is accurate. I will give him that. He's extremely accurate. He's usually going to put the ball, between the numbers, wherever you need it, whenever like he throws the football, and he throws it with timing and anticipation, and he's good at those things. But whenever it's like a little bit out of structure, whenever you need a special throw outside the numbers, it just never really happens. Even the big time bomb touchdown in this game to Tyreek Hill, which was the only score for the Dolphins in this game, it was essentially like an arm punt. I mean, he throws it up, and Tyreek Hill has to come back and get the ball, and it's just, and then he just breaks the tackle to run it into the end zone. But it's just, Tua has limitations. I don't know what the Dolphins want to do long term when it comes to quarterbacking, because I think this is going to be where they have to make a decision on his 5th-year option. They'll probably go ahead and just sign the 5th-year option, but I don't think they're going to get a long-term deal done. There's inklings out there that they want to, but I don't know, man. I feel like you don't have to rush this decision whatsoever. There could be potential free agents that do come up that are like a little bit more, I don't know, just they might just be a little bit better of a player. Like, I don't know what the situation is going to end up being with Kirk Cousins. If Kirk Cousins is available somehow from the Minnesota Vikings, I go grab him and throw Tua to the wayside. I'll be honest. And like, I'm not a huge Kirk fan, but I'm a much bigger Kirk fan than I am Tua. I think Kirk can really get it done. He's proven that he's got a very good arm, and I think he could work that Shanahan system to a T. Kyle Shanahan himself thinks he can, because he was the one that he wanted before ever signing Jimmy G way back when. The San Francisco 49ers ended up trading for him from the New England Patriots. So Shanahan clearly thinks that Kirk Cousins can run his offense perfectly, and I think Mike McDaniel would love to have a guy like that, even though he is coming off a Achilles and it was kind of later in the season. We'll see how that injury and the progression of that goes, but obviously you saw Aaron Rodgers recover very quickly from his Achilles. I mean, he wasn't ever going to play this season. That was all a bunch of baloney for the most part, and just trying to get attention. But you can still very easily come back from an Achilles in a timely fashion. We've seen it more likely as of late with modern medicine and all that good stuff. But Chiefs get a huge win. I expected it. Nothing really changed there with the way I thought the game would go. Went pretty much exactly how I thought it would. Not to really like pat myself on the back, but it's just the Chiefs at home against a Miami team that's just not used to the elements like that. I thought that was one of the easier bets of the weekend. Let's move on to probably the shocker of all of the weekend. Obviously the Texans destroying the Browns was a shocker to jump off Super Wildcard weekend, but nobody expected the 7.5-point favorite Dallas Cowboys to get completely run out of their own stadium this weekend. It was an insane game. I personally, as an Eagles fan and a known Cowboys hater, that's the most fun I've seen watching a football game for like the past 2 months or more. Basically, since the Eagles versus Buffalo Bills game where the Eagles won the game in overtime. That was the last time I smiled watching a Philadelphia Eagles football game, to be completely honest with you. And I was just full of pure joy on Sunday watching the Dallas Cowboys just get absolutely wrecked at home. Let's just start, I guess, on the offensive side of the ball for the Packers. Basically, they were able to stay balanced the entire game. They came out the game straight up like, we're going to establish Aaron Jones as a real threat in this game. We're going to run the ball with Aaron Jones, and we're going to make them think about him the entire game. Then they could stay under center pretty much the entire game, and then go to their hard play action plays, and they had people running wide open all game long after that. The Dallas Cowboys were on their heels the entire time after that. They went straight down the field, scored a touchdown, and that set the standard for which, the game was going to go. Obviously it was a huge deal to get a lead. That's what the Cowboys despise. The Cowboys want to grab a lead first and then let their pass rush get after you for the rest of the game. But this was never going to be the case with the Packers, as the Packers decided to receive. They actually won the coin toss and then received, which then meant that they, obviously felt confident they could go down the field and score and put themselves in a position to just play call and things of that nature the way they wanted to, the way Matt LaFleur really wanted to get things going on the offensive side of the ball. And then Jordan Love just had a heck of a game, dude. Him and CJ Stroud, just two young guys just slinging around the field in their first playoff appearances ever and just getting the job done. I saw a stat where essentially their stat lines were almost identical. It was kind of scary to see just how close they were. And I think their passer ratings were identical. I think their completion percentage was identical. I think CJ Stroud had 2 more yards than Jordan Love, and then they both had 3 touchdown passes thrown. So crazy stats there. 2 young guys just letting it rip in Super Wildcard weekend. But yeah, Jordan Love had a ridiculous game, throwing off platform, throwing sidearm, trick shots, freaking on his back foot, slinging 30, 40-yard bombs to Dontavian Wicks in the end zone. Just he was getting it done no matter what. Aaron Jones was scoring at will. They dropped a 40-burger on the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys tried to make it look respectable at the end of the game, but the game was definitely way in hand. So you look at the stat line for Dak Prescott, and it looks good. He throws 2 interceptions. One was a pick 6 in a very bad spot. Basically, the Packers at that point had just taken all of the momentum essentially in the game, and then the possession right after he throws a pick 6, and it pretty much busted that game wide open. The Cowboys were able to go down right before half and score a touchdown, got the ball in second half, went down and kicked a field goal, and that was essentially all they wrote, because then the Packers went right back down the field and scored a touchdown with Aaron Jones, and they just kept answering the bell whenever the Cowboys even gave like a little bit of glimmer of hope. But like I said, Dak Prescott's numbers at the end of the day are going to look better than they were, because he just was essentially stat padding at the very end there. So just Packers get a huge W. A lot of questions going into the offseason for the Dallas Cowboys. That is 3 years in a row they've been 12-5 and essentially went one and done. I know last year they did beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which that was like the ghost of Tom Brady, and like it felt like that Tampa Bay Buccaneers team was just ready to go home last year. So it was just, I don't know what you do with Mike McCarthy. He is a guy that I've never had real confidence in as a play caller, as a just game manager, things of that nature. Just like certain decisions he makes during football games are just not. They just don't give his team a competitive advantage. I don't think he does anything egregiously terrible, but like he just sometimes he screws stuff up in high leverage situations, and so does Dak Prescott, to be completely honest with you. That is once again like 3 or 4 years in a row now where high leverage situation, the lights get a little bit too bright for Dak Prescott, and he makes some very terrible throws and decisions and just interceptions in general that completely destroy the chances of his team to win. So there's a lot going on there with the Cowboys. Jerry Jones looked pissed off. He did not want to comment on any kind of future situation with the head coaching there, and they have decisions on a lot of free agents. Micah Parsons needs to be paid. CeeDee Lamb needs to be paid. Dak Prescott is ready for an extension as well. They have a lot of big-time free agents that need to be re-signed or are just going to be let go out the door this offseason. So it could be a rough offseason for the Cowboys. Maybe whoever they hire going forward, if they do some reason let go of Mike McCarthy, which I don't think would be the worst idea that's ever happened for their franchise, in my opinion. I hope that they continue to use Mike McCarthy as their head coach, because like I said, I don't think he gives them any competitive advantage whatsoever. He's just going to be a middling head coach in the National Football League. He'll probably do good in the regular season like he always does, and completely fold in the playoffs. But like I was saying, I think if they do go in a different direction for their head coach, maybe that shifts something in the team in general. But I just don't see a path where the Cowboys do anything but kind of, crumble a little bit here, because it's too similar of a situation every single year that we've seen for the past 3 years, where they have a great regular season. So basically next year, essentially what I'm saying is, if they have a good regular season, they're going to be unsatisfied, and they're going to just rest in their laurels, because at the end of the day, they know nothing matters until they get to the playoffs. And then there's going to be the stigma, obviously, of we're just going to fold in the playoffs. So mentally, they're going to have to do a lot of gymnastics to get their mind right going forward in the just coming years. I don't know what's going to happen there, but it's going to be very interesting. It's going to make for great content and great offseason when you got franchises as big as the Cowboys and potentially the Eagles, and I'll get to that in a little bit, potentially looking for head coaching positions. Let's move on. We have the Rams versus Lions, the best game easily of the weekend. Every other game, for the most part, was more or less a blowout. So best game of the weekend, 1 point margin. You have Jared Goff, obviously, versus Matthew Stafford. Everybody knows the story about how both of them were essentially traded for each other. You got extra draft capital and going to the Detroit Lions in that trade, of course. Matthew Stafford goes on with the Rams, wins the Super Bowl in 2021, I think that was. And then you have Jared Goff, who has just progressively got better and better and just gotten more and more confidence in himself as Dan Campbell and that coaching staff has really just fed into him and poured into him as a coaching staff. And they've done such an incredible job. They get their first home playoff game in a long time, and they get the big W. I mean, they played great. It was such a good game, man. Jared Goff was slinging it. Matthew Stafford for sure was slinging it out there. He was doing some crazy stuff. It's like he went back home and was like, "I'm gonna show." It's like he was the dad that came home and was like, "Man, I'm gonna show my kids exactly like what I can do." Like it's like he was playing backyard basketball or something like that, and was just like, "I'm about to hoop on these kids." And dude, he had a fantastic day. He was slinging the rock around to Puka Nacua, who, man, what a crazy performance from him too. He had like 180 yards. Just what a crazy season. I think he was like a 5th round pick or something like that, and just out of BYU, nobody knew who he was essentially. And man, they've been hitting on a lot of those 5th round picks as of late. Him and Kyron Williams are both 5th round picks, and Kyron Williams is such a good player as well. So Les Snead up there out there in LA has been doing a fantastic job of coach or drafting around their deficiencies, considering they have decided to essentially trade away all their high draft picks as of late to basically get that one Super Bowl with Matthew Stafford, which it paid off. You can't fault them for that. But now all the fruits of their big time drafting acumen has come through. So impressive stuff there. But the Lions got the job done at the end of the day. They essentially were able to stifle the Rams offense in the red zone areas. They had to kick a ton of field goals in the red zone. And, a lot of people are getting on Sean McVay's case right now because of his decision making in some of those situations where it's like, man, sometimes you just gotta go for it. Like, your defense had clearly been getting cooked all game. You really shouldn't have that much confidence in them going forward. You have to, your best group is obviously your offense. So why not put a little bit more confidence in them and try to go for it in one of these situations where you get to 4th down and goal or whatever it may be, which I think they kicked 2 like super, super short field goals. So it was like, I think it was a situation where McVay really should have pulled the trigger earlier on in the game and seen if he could get a touchdown rather than a field goal. So, it's just Sean McVay. That's like the one blind spot in his coaching, career. He's always had those situations where he's made some split-second decisions that, looking back and in hindsight, were not great. We'll see if moving forward he can kind of fix that about the way he goes about his business coaching. But other than that, man, scheme wise, just getting his guys in positions to win, he is one of the best in all of football. So if he can just fix that, man, it's going to be, obviously he's already won a Super Bowl, so he doesn't really have a whole lot to prove. But like, if he could fix that, man, he could go on some crazy runs here at the end of Matt Stafford's career, because Matt Stafford's still playing out of his mind right now. He's playing great football, and obviously the weapons there they have young, good talent there on offense for the Rams. They just got to get a few free agents, and I think they have some money this offseason coming up where they can start using some of that to go grab some marquee free agents who wouldn't want to go out there and play in LA in that stadium at SoFi. I know there's not a whole lot of real fan base out there, but at the end of the day, like, good weather in a dome, you're playing in the NFC West, which it's tough, but like, it's winnable at times, especially if you're the guy that has the better quarterback of any of the other 3 teams in the division. So, just Rams still stock up coming out of this. They almost win against the Detroit Lions, who are clearly the better of the 2 teams. So the better team won in this situation. And based on obviously all the other stuff that happened this weekend with the Cowboys losing, they're going to get another home playoff game. The Lions, I should say here, going to get another playoff game, going to get another opportunity to win a playoff game, and then potentially go to the NFC Championship game in the year that, like, the first year they win a playoff game. That would be just such a wild story, and I think it's going to happen. Spoiler alert, the Eagles aren't going up to Detroit, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are, and I think the Detroit Lions can definitely win that game very easily, in my opinion. We'll get to that a little bit later. Let's move on to the Bills versus the Steelers here. This one, I didn't think, to be completely honest with you, the Steelers had a chance in this game. They tried, they really did, but it just was never really going to be enough here. The Bills, they kind of messed around with their food a little bit longer than I thought they would. They got out to a hot start, and then they kind of let the Steelers get back into it a little bit, and then the Bills finally put the foot on their throat and just kind of stomped them out. Really, there's nothing to say here. Mike Tomlin, there was some questions after the game, after, saying this is the last year of his contract. Is he going to re-up? Blah, blah, blah. Is he going to be done? Is he going to retire for a year, come back in coaching a year after? There's a lot of decisions to be made by Mike Tomlin and the organization of the Pittsburgh Steelers going forward. And then he's already come out and said he is intending to come back as the Steelers head coach next season. So there was some speculation, but I think he's made a decision that he's going to probably stick with at this point. So he will be back with the Steelers, which is good. Obviously, he's a great head coach. I don't like the situation he's in, unfortunately. You got Kenny Pickett. You got to figure that out. He's not the guy. So they got to figure out the quarterback position going forward. And I don't know how many years that's going to set that franchise back necessarily, but hopefully not too much longer, because this is a good franchise. Mike Tomlin, I just don't like wasting his time there as a head coach. That could be really getting the job done elsewhere if he did decide to go elsewhere. So I just really hope they can turn it around sooner rather than later. But yeah, Bills get a win. Not a whole lot to say here. Khalil Shakir had a ridiculous play in this game where he scored a touchdown at the end there to essentially seal this game. Stephon Diggs really didn't even get involved in this game. I don't know what's been up with that. It's like since Joe Brady took over as the offensive coordinator from Ken Dorsey, Stephon Diggs just hasn't been a big part of the game plan. I don't know what's up with that. James Cook had another good game in this one. Obviously Gabe Davis did not play in this game. There was a lot of injuries, people going in and out of the lineup for the Bills defense in this one. We'll see how healthy they end up being for this playoff game. They're going to get a home playoff game against Kansas City, rematch of the divisional matchup, where essentially they had to change the overtime rules because of the fact that Josh Allen never got a chance in that game a few years ago when Patrick Mahomes, that was like the 7-second game where he had 7 seconds to go down, kick a field goal to take it to overtime, and then got the first possession, went right down, scored a touchdown, and that was it. That's all she wrote. So we will get a rematch of that, but it will be in New York and Buffalo this time. So Josh Allen will have the home crowd behind him, and we'll see how that goes. And like I said, I'll get to the previews for that a little bit later. Now let's move on to the Eagles versus Buccaneers. The fact that they made me wait this long to watch the Eagles completely collapse and go ahead and finish the job was painful at the very least. Basically, it happened exactly the way I thought it would happen, to be completely honest with you. I bet Buccaneers +3. Should have bet Buccaneers money line, to be fair. That's how strongly I felt about it by the time the game rolled around to start. And then very clearly, first drive, Eagles defer, defense gets on the field, and it was hot knife through butter. The Buccaneers went straight down the field, and really they just kind of stalled. There was nothing that the Eagles really did on defense that really stopped them. It was more of the Buccaneers kind of shooting themselves in the foot. They kick a field goal. And then from there, it was essentially just a whole lot of Mike Evans drops and Rachaad White drops here and there early on in the game, which kept the Eagles just kind of in the game. That the offense could really never get anything going because obviously Todd Bowles watched film just like every other defensive coordinator in the league did against the Eagles this year and said, oh wait, they're the worst team in football at accounting for the blitz. Let me just blitz him on 58% of Jalen Hurts dropbacks. The offense, the first drive of the game, 2 straight essentially DeAndre Swift runs, and they got a first down. And then from then on out, they did not run the ball for the most part for the rest of the game. It was just such a maddening experience to watch what has transpired the last few weeks with the Eagles. Just coaching malpractice on both sides of the ball. Like I said, there was like 3 Mike Evans bomb drops and a Rachaad White, drop, and I think there was a K-Dot and drop mixed in there. there was like 7 drops that if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers just connect on those, the Eagles would have been down by like 34 in the first half. Like, it was a disgrace that the Eagles were even like kind of in this game. It was 16-9 for like 2.5 quarters for like no reason. And then finally the Buccaneers got their head out of their rear and scored a ton of points. And I was just ready for it to be over with. I mean, it felt like the longest game of my life. I've never been more disappointed in a coaching staff for just putting a product on the field that was so uninspiring that I just didn't even want to watch it anymore. But honestly, it was almost so bad that it was entertaining to watch. Like, I was sitting there giggling at just how inept the offense was at times and how bad the defense was and how much they didn't want to be there. The tackling was essentially just some Olay defense. They were like just letting people run by them. It was embarrassing, really. And I don't know if you're Jeffrey Lurie or Howie Roseman, how you watch what the Eagles displayed the last 7 weeks of the football season and don't make a head coaching change. Like, I take zero pleasure in calling for Nick Sirianni's job as I was such a fan of his, man. Like, I really was. Like, last year, you could have recorded me saying this. I probably said it more than 10 times last season. I was so happy that Nick Sirianni was our head coach because he gives us a competitive advantage as a head coach because he knows how to manage the play clock. He knows that's a heck of a gift there. Anyways, or gaff. Still screwing up my speeches there. Anyways, he knows how to manage the play clock. He knows how to call timeouts whenever it makes sense. He knows when to go for it on 4th down. He's an aggressive play call. Like, I said all those things multiple times last season, and the problem is apparently the guy that was behind all that was Shane Steichen, and he's in Indianapolis now. And it's so maddening to think that's how that happened, and that's who was behind the scenes making things actually work for us. It's crazy that like this is the situation the Eagles find themselves in at this point. And obviously it all boils down to, you watch, if you just look on Twitter right now at any kind of Eagles coverage, they're going to point out just how disgusting of a situation the blitz situation is for the Eagles, where they just they haven't all season given Jalen Hurts a real answer for cover zero or any kind of heavy pressure when it comes to the defense sending extra guys. They don't have hot routes built into the offense whatsoever. You can screenshot the plays whenever there's an unblocked defender coming at Jalen Hurts' face. There's all these receivers downfield, 10 yards plus, not even turning their heads around. It's like, what do you expect Jalen Hurts to do? And you have people out there saying Jalen Hurts has regressed and blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, he hadn't played as good as he did last year. It was almost impossible for him to do that. He had one of the best years of all time last year. This year, he was never going to have the same numbers, and it was never going to look the same. But at the same time, like, the coaching staff didn't do any favors to Jalen Hurts this season, and obviously he's also been dealing with some injuries. He dealt with a knee injury pretty much all season long. He was in this game with a dislocated middle finger that was still giving him some problems. I think this team quit on the coaching staff, and I think if that's the case, there's no way you bring back Nick Sirianni next year. I just think if you bring him back, you're going to see this exact situation get worse than it already was, and then they're going to be like a 4-12 team, and it's just going to be super, super ugly, or I guess 4-13 team, whatever it ends up being now with 17 games. But anyways, I just think it's going to get so much worse if you don't just go ahead and move off of Nick Sirianni. I think he's lost the locker room. I think at the end of the season there, everybody was just going through the motions because they knew they were going nowhere fast. So there was no point in really giving full effort and full energy towards anything, whether that be real leadership, whether that be trying to fix the offense, whether that be running your routes well or executing on offense or defense. I think everybody knew that this situation was only going to get worse and worse as the season progressed. And really at the end of the day, if you would ask, I feel like any of the players, if they really wanted to play in that playoff game, they would all said no. They would have rather been, on vacation already. And I just think they need to hit the reset button this offseason. And if that's the case, then obviously they become one of the hotter head coaching jobs in the league because of just the amount of talent that they do have. We'll see how that goes, but that's pretty much my whole deal with the Eagles there. Shout out obviously to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers who actually got the job done at the end of the day. But honestly, it took them way too long to put the nail in the coffin of the Eagles when they were essentially giving up. So that does not bode well for them going into the next round against the Detroit Lions at home in that crazy crowd that we saw against the Rams. So Buccaneers win. I don't think they're going to go any further. They're also going to have some decisions at the end of the season, what they do with Baker Mayfield, considering he was on a one-year deal. He played pretty well. He didn't play super, super well. He had some very good games throughout the season, but do you pay him big money going into next season? Do you give him a long-term contract? I don't know if that's something they want to commit to right now, so they have questions as well, especially considering I think really the Detroit Lions are going to smoke them this upcoming weekend, but that's pretty much it for Super Wildcard Weekend. I know I went super long there, but it's just a lot to cover, a lot of ins and outs and intimate storylines of all of these squads and these teams that matched up in Super Wildcard Weekend. Let's go on to. I'm just going to go ahead and sit here and kind of list off the head coaching openings when it comes to the team. So first off, we have the Washington Commanders. It should be a pretty, a pretty good spot for some head coaches if they wanted to go there. On the offensive side of the ball, you have weapons. You have Terry McLaurin. You have Jahan Dotson. You have Curtis Samuel, Brian Robinson Jr., Antonio Gibson, Logan Thomas. They have a good offense over there. The defense used to have pieces. They traded away two of them, obviously, during the season this season in Montez Sweat and Chase Young. So they're not as deep there, and they don't have as much young talent as they used to, but they still have some pretty good players on that defense, but it's something that they're going to have to go back to the drawing board for. But they also do own the number 2 overall pick in the draft, so they're going to get one of their choice of Drake May or Caleb Williams or whoever they fancy in that spot. So that's a nice little spot for a head coach to step into as well. Then you have the Falcons job. I personally think the Falcons job is a nice spot for a head coach as well. You have a guy in Bijan Robinson, who's a very good player. You have Kyle Pitts, a good player. You have Drake London, a very good player. The offensive line is very solid. They're a great run blocking offensive line and a pretty solid pass blocking one as well. So you have weapons. You have an O-line. The defense was way better than I anticipated them to be this season. Jesse Bates was a huge deal this season for the Falcons. The defensive coordinator of the Falcons actually did a very good job. So we'll see if he gets essentially retained coming from the Arthur Smith, coaching tree there. We'll see if the next head coach steps in and brings his own guy there, or if that guy can potentially continue to stay there and be the guy moving forward, because they did have a good defensive unit for the most part this season. Obviously, the only question about the Falcons is their their quarterback position. Desmond Ridder, clearly not the guy. Taylor Heineke, I think he was on a 1-year deal. He was obviously the backup, but he played a lot this season because Arthur Smith couldn't make up his mind on who was the better fit for the offense moving forward. And so, obviously, big question there. Are they going to try to grab a free agent? That's the exact way I think they are going to lean. Like, honestly, if you told me Russell Wilson was their I keep saying head coach instead of quarterback. If you told me Russell Wilson was going to be the quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons next year, I would say that they are going to be a much improved team, and they could very easily win the NFC South with that being the case. So I think they go the free agent route. I don't think that they're a little bit too far up the list of trying to get one of the top quarterbacks unless they make some trades, which it's possible. We'll see. Jaden Daniels is out there. There's still some guys that might go a little bit later in the draft that some of these teams can kind of move up for and snag in the first round of the draft if that's what they decide to do. Let's move on. We're going to talk about the Raiders. The Raiders are open, obviously. They played hard to end the season for Antonio Pierce, the interim head coach that took over after Josh McDaniels got fired, obviously. I'm of the opinion that they need to go ahead and just hire Antonio Pierce and get over with it. Just go ahead and make the decision so your players are at ease going into the offseason. They'll go ahead and start working out and be excited about next season because it's a guy that they love and a guy that they trust in Antonio Pierce as their head coach. I think you just need to go ahead and make that decision. Obviously, the last few years, the interim head coaches have done a good job for the Raiders, and then they've gone off and just tried to grab one of the prize like free agent head coaching guys in the pool of that offseason, like Josh McDaniels, and just paid him a bunch of money. They did it with John Gruden, paid him a bunch of money, and neither one of those worked out very well. So I think you just need to go ahead and commit to the interim head coach guy in Antonio Pierce, and I think he's going to do a great job for you if that's the case. We have the Seahawks job, which is open. Also considering Pete Carroll pseudo-retired. He may move into not head coaching, an ownership type, not ownership, but front office type, situation there in Seattle. But I think he just kind of was kind of shoved to the side there. I think they were like, we kind of need to get a little bit younger in this situation. So I personally think Dan Quinn is going to be the guy there. I think probably Mike McCarthy, if he retains his job, it's going to get ugly there because Dan Quinn's going to be gone. I think he's going to be the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks moving forward. If Mike McCarthy gets fired, obviously the Dan Quinn is free to go essentially in any rate. So I think he's just going to be the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks moving forward. It just makes too much sense. The next one, Chargers. They've obviously done a whole lot of interviewing as of late. I don't really have any specific guy that should go there, but obviously I want a offensive-minded guy to take over and take the reins and just try to form Justin Herbert and give him the best chance to be the best quarterback he can be. So, some of these names I have down here, Bobby Slowick from the Houston Texans, if he ends up, coming back or, just getting head coaching, interest from there, that would be interesting because he has done such a great job with CJ Stroud there in Houston. That would be a huge spot for him to go to. You have a guy like Frank Smith, the offensive coordinator there for the Miami Dolphins. Dave Canales, the offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think a lot of those guys would be great if they were to go out there to Los Angeles and coach the Chargers and Justin Herbert. Next one, Titans. Obviously, head coach opening there because they kind of essentially just let go of Mike Vrabel, which I think is a mistake. He's a guy that players really, really play hard for. They never die. They're always in games, no matter how bad the roster is. Usually, I just think he gets the most out of the least. Essentially, like he gets more out of less than a lot of head coaches in all of football. So I just think Mike Vrabel is a very good head coach, and I think the Titans kind of made a mistake there. But I mean, to their credit, I guess, they probably think that whole situation has kind of run its course at this point. He's done as much as he possibly can, and they're just kind of looking to start a different era of Tennessee Titans football. So it is what it is. And then you got the Panthers. They are probably the least attractive job at this point right now, considering Dave Tepper and the way he's been meddling in situations and how much control he wants to have in situations in the football, in the organization in general. They're looking for a general manager as well, so I would assume they're going to get a general manager. Then they're going to probably hire whatever head coach that guy kind of sees fit. So we'll see how that goes. But that is just not an attractive job considering the way Bryce Young looked in year one, which I think he'll be better pretty much no matter what moving forward if they just get him some weapons and an offensive line that's formidable. But I just don't like that job for a whole lot of these coaching candidates moving forward. But yeah, I kind of mentioned some of these guys, but let me just run off on some of these head coaching candidates that I personally I think they should be at the top of the list for a lot of these openings. Belichick, obviously the biggest name out there. He is essentially let go by the New England Patriots, who replaced him immediately with Gerard Mayo, former linebacker for the team under Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick apparently was privy to the situation, knew this is exactly what was going to happen. So not a huge shocker there. But I think Gerard Mayo is probably going to be great. But let's get back to the head coaches, the hot candidates, I should say. Belichick, like I said, big name out there. We'll see how that goes. The Atlanta Falcons already have interviewed him. That would be a very interesting spot for him. I kind of like that situation. The storyline's crazy. The 28-3 Super Bowl, blah blah blah. It would be very interesting, and it comes out today that he kind of wants like a project. He kind of wants a team that just is underachieving, but they have some young talent. So I think that definitely counts for the Atlanta Falcons, and I think that would be a nice little match. So Belichick out there, we'll see who ends up jumping all over that situation. But I do like the Falcons right off rip there. Ben Johnson, obviously the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. I like him a whole lot. He has done so much for Jared Goff in that offense, and just the way he's been utilizing his playmakers as of late. I was questioning him a little bit when at the beginning of the season he was not using Jahmyr Gibbs as much as he should have, but maybe he was just kind of working him into the offense, and maybe I should have gave him a little bit more grace at the beginning of the season there. But by the end of it, man, Jahmyr Gibbs, or not the end of it because they're still playing, but Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, and they're using their guys perfectly now. Like, it is like you just can't really get any more juice out of what the Detroit Lions offense looks like right now. So Ben Johnson, one of the hottest offensive coordinator to head coach jumps. Just the storyline there. There's going to be a lot of teams clamoring. He's already got a ton of interviews, it looks like. So he will be a head coach in this next cycle here, obviously. Jim Harbaugh, another huge name. I'm not for it. I do not think this is going to be a good idea. When he was with San Fran, obviously he went to the Super Bowl, had a few very good years there. But I feel like by the end of his tenure there in San Fran, he was doing some hairy high school BS. He was the guy that was like going up to coaches and like not really shaking their hand after losses. Like, I thought that he was a little bit immature in those situations. He obviously just won the national title game in college football. I think he's definitely more suited to where he can be like the manager type guy over some college kids, over the NFL, grown men, grown adults out there. Because if you're doing immature stuff, kind of like we learned Nick Sirianni's been doing the last couple years, if you're doing that, it's going to be hard to keep your players' respect when things start to go the wrong way. And I think that's the case for what can happen for Jim Harbaugh for a second time in a row if he comes back to the NFL. So I'm not a huge fan of the Jim Harbaugh thing. He's already got interviews with the Chargers. Maybe some other teams will be in the mix, but I just do not like it going forward. Next one, Bobby Slowick. Obviously, I've already kind of made a statement about him, and he's the offensive coordinator for the Houston Texans. Done an incredible job getting just people wide open in that offense. Just for CJ Stroud, just bringing CJ Stroud along that easily in his first year as a rookie quarterback is very impressive. So that alone will get you head coaching looks in the NFL. I would be super excited if the Eagles were to give him a look if they were to decide to fire Nick Sirianni this offseason. On the defensive side of the ball, we have, because most of these guys that I've said were all, for the most part, offensive guys. Belichick, obviously, more of a defensive guy. But we have Brian Flores as well. I like him a lot. He got so much out of just a terrible roster for the most part in the Vikings defensive side of the ball there. He was able to have one of the better defenses in all of football with his exotic blitzes this season. So, I just think he deserves another shot at a head coaching opportunity as well. Mike McDonald, a defensive coordinator for the Ravens, who have been playing lights out football on that side of the ball as well, came from Michigan under Jim Harbaugh. He's obviously with John, his brother now, and I think he is poised to be a head coach in this league as well. He seems like a really good defensive coordinator and defensive-minded head coach as well. I think he can be a nice leader of men as well. He just seems like that kind of personality. Next, obviously, Mike Vrabel, already said stuff about him. Kind of already alluded to how much I like him as a head coach as well, defensive-minded guy as well. And then, like I said, he's just a guy that your team never gives up on. It doesn't matter how bad the roster is. It doesn't matter what the record is. They always find a reason to fight for him as a head coach. So I like that in my head coach as well. So Mike Vrabel's out there. You have guys like Frank Smith, offensive coordinator for the Dolphins, who does not call plays underneath Mike McDaniel there in Miami, but he obviously knows the system. He's coming from the Shanahan tree / McDaniel tree at this point, so he might get some looks. Dave Canales, I said something about him as well. He is a guy that is the offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and has kind of given Baker Mayfield a little bit of a resurgence here at the end of, or not the end of his career, but just a resurgence in general, because it was just going in the wrong direction for the last few years. To see what he did last year in Carolina for like how long he did, and to see what he did this year is just night and day. So that is the work of a good offensive coordinator for the most part. Let's move on. We have the divisional round of the playoffs. We'll get to that preview and prediction. We're going to go ahead and start with the Texans, and I will go Texans +9 versus the Ravens. That line's just a little bit too big for me. Texans have been playing good ball. Ravens might come out a little bit rusty and a little bit sluggish, considering they had the bye week. I don't know how much I really play into is the bye week a good thing or a bad thing for football teams? Do teams want to, keep the momentum going when it comes to stuff like that? I don't know what the real statistics are on that. I don't know how much I play into any of that stuff, but I do think the Texans can keep this very competitive, but I think at the end of the day, the Ravens are just the better team. Lamar Jackson will make a few plays to win them the game. Like I said, Mike McDonald will get that defense ready to go, and he will try to expose, C.J. Stroud's weaknesses as a rookie quarterback, and I think the Ravens will win the game, but I think the Texans can cover. Let's move on. We got the Packers +9.5 versus the 49ers. This is another situation where I think the line's just a little bit too big for me. Jordan Love and that offense are clicking on all cylinders right now. I am a little bit afraid of the fact that Shanahan will be going up against Joe Barry, who obviously he did a good job against Mike McCarthy, but Mike McCarthy runs a very simple West Coast offense, and Joe Barry knows how to defend against that. I don't know if he knows how to really defend against a Kyle Shanahan San Francisco 49ers team that has a ton of weapons and things of that nature. But I think Jordan Love, that offense right now, can really stay competitive in this game, considering what they just did to the Cowboys defense, which is also a good defense. 49ers defense is right there with the Cowboys defense when it comes to talent and speed and physicality and things of that nature. So I think Jordan Love and the Packers offense can keep it competitive, and they will cover against the 49ers. Lions -6 versus the Buccaneers. I think the Lions are going to smoke the Buccaneers. I think this line is probably a little even low for what I just watched against the Eagles. The Buccaneers really could not even put the nail in the coffin. The Eagles, when the Eagles were essentially like begging them and praying for them to go ahead and end the game, they just couldn't even do it. So I just think a Lions team that's just so much better than the Eagles are right this second are going to crush this Buccaneers team, when the Eagles at times look like they could potentially steal the game from the Buccaneers last night. So I just think the Lions are just a much better team at this point. And then last but not least, we have the Chiefs +3 versus the Bills. I think the Bills, with how banged up they've ended up on defense, obviously you have the Chiefs, whose defense is very, very good, and they're playing great at the right time. Mahomes, Andy Reid, time to prepare. Just a 1-week season, backs against the wall again. They're on the road. I think Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes are going to make some plays and get the job done. So I will take the Chiefs +3. So that pretty much wraps up all of the Super Wildcard Weekend recap episode of Coordinated Chaos. I appreciate everybody listening. This was a long one. I apologize if you didn't want to stick around for this. I understand, because a lot of it was just me ranting about the Eagles and how bad they suck and how much Nick Sirianni needs to go. And I am still doing it. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this thing up. Follow, like, subscribe, just all the things, rate and review on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, wherever you may be listening. Turn on those notification bells for later on in this week when I do my full-blown gambling predictions on YouTube Shorts and TikTok. I will reserve the right to change my opinion on the things I did say here on the gambling preview. Those opinions may change, and you will see them by the end of the week, and we will see if we can continue this hot streak I'm on. I went 5 out of 6 in gambling predictions this past weekend. The only one I missed was the Browns game, where I bet for them to cover against the Texans. Otherwise, I smacked all of them. So I am on a little bit of a heater right now, which is really nice, and it feels good to be, just kind of right at the end of the season here. It's like as the season progressed, I have gotten more and more confident in my abilities to pick these games against the spread and stuff of that nature. But I appreciate everybody listening, and I will talk to you guys next week. Peace.